Hello and welcome to week 3, part 1 of the Song of Solomon study. Today in lesson 3, we'll be starting in chapter 2, verse 8. But I wanted to do a quick review to begin. Last week when we left off with the man and the woman, they were having just a great outdoor picnic date, and we saw that being in his presence was very healing to the woman. And so we're going to see that their relationship progress throughout today, and how this relationship continues to be healing to her, but also some warnings and some pitfalls that we can all fall into, as well as we end with her nightmare or her dream. So we will go ahead, and I want us to start off in chapter 2, verses 8 through 10. She adores her beloved. The voice of my beloved, behold, he comes, leaping over the mountains, bounding over the hills. And my beloved is like a gazelle or a young stag. Behold, there he is behind our wall, gazing through the windows, looking through the lattice. My beloved speaks and says to me, arise, my love, my beautiful one, and come away. So we still have the woman talking. She finished talking in 7, and she's continuing to talk, and she is talking or declaring, I believe, to the others these things about the man. So the first thing I wanted to start off with noticing what the section title is. Now, these are not in the original writings, but they are very helpful to us. Okay, so they are useful in understanding. So we have right above verse 8 in the ESV, it says, she adores her beloved. So we said that she was being sustained and renewed by him with the raisins and the apples, and now she is just gonna overflow of what's in her heart out of her mouth about who? Her beloved. So in your study notes, I put down 2 definitions because I think they are helpful to us as we go through today. So first off, and we've hit this definition in other Bible studies as well, and that is the word beloved. The title beloved means dearly loved, dear to heart. Okay, so he calls her beloved, she calls him beloved, and that is what they are to each other. Dearly loved, close, or dear to heart. But then we also have in that title, she adores her beloved. So adore is kind of like a word we use often that we know, but I like to look up these definitions a lot of time to bring a more wealth of understanding as we go through. So adore means to worship or honor as a deity or as a divine. And then the next definition is to regard with loving admiration and devotion. So the more appropriate one in this between an earthly couple would be the second one, right? We don't worship our spouses, but we know that in this book it is special because it is a foreshadowing of the better King Jesus. So I do like us to keep both of those definitions in mind when we're kind of going back and forth in our mind of, well, how does this point me in a right relationship to Christ, or how does this relate to a earthly human relationship? So to worship or honor as a deity or as a divine. So that is saved only for, right, Christ, God. We do not worship people. But within this, there is this theme of honor, which we have hit on before. And this woman, again, is very honoring in her speech to this man. And that is important in marriages. I think we are a honor lacking culture, society, and we need to build up honor in our relationships, especially in our marriages. But to regard with loving admiration and devotion. So I kind of wrote this out as a reminder for myself as I went through this, is what is she doing? She is proclaiming that she lovingly admires him, lovingly admires him. what she finds honorable, and what is worthy of her devotion. So once again, I think she's declaring these things not just out in the empty space, but to her others and convicting. Do I do this in when I talk about Jesus? Do I do this when I talk about my husband? Those are good things to think of. So, especially in verses 8 through 10, we are going to see her doing this, but I wanted us to start with taking note of the things specifically that she admires, things she adores about him. So, verse 8, the voice of my beloved. So, the first thing that we see that she admires that is worthy of her devotion is his voice. And this reminded me of John 10:26-28. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they will never perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand. So these sheep, right? We're all sheep. Jesus is the shepherd. We should know his voice. We should long to hear his voice and follow it. This is a woman who is attentive. She longs to hear him. Now, often me and Micah right now are having the discussion about the difference between listening and hearing, especially at night when we're supposed to be reading for school. Like, Mommy, I hear you. It's like, I know you hear sounds, son, but do you listen? Are you attentive? Are you storing those words? And later on, we're going to see this woman has stored this man's words in her brain, at least. I would say it's in her heart as well. So am I attentive to his voice? The second thing we see, behold, he comes, leaping over the mountains, bounding over the hills. So she adores the way this man moves, but specifically, how is he moving? So he's leaping and he's covering great distances, great feats to get to her. But what is he doing? He is coming to her. And that's going to be important in this theme of today, that between this man and this woman, there is a turning towards one another, a coming together. So she admires the fact that he has put forth effort to come to her. Okay. Psalm 17:6 says this, I call on you, my God, for you will answer me. Turn your ear to me and hear my prayer. So last week we talked about that this woman has called out to her, and now we see her praising his response. He comes. He is coming towards me. He is turning to me. All right. So that was verse 8. And verse 9, we're going to see our next lovely thing about this man. My beloved is like a gazelle or a young stag. Behold, there he stands behind our wall, gazing through the windows, looking through the lattice. All right, so I had to turn off the Phil Collins song, I'll Be Watching You, because that's creepy, right? And this man is not creepy to her, so I know we got to get that Peeping Tom imagery out of our modern heads to think that this is a man who longs to, puts up great effort to see her and to find her. Okay. So he longs to look at her, and that's admirable. Remember, this is a woman who is just a couple, well, not even a chapter ago, has told her friends, don't look at me. Right. But he wants to see her. Matthew 13:45-47, Jesus gives us this parable, and it's super short, but this is the parable of the pearl of great value. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls, who on finding one pearl of great value went and sold all that he had and bought it. Right? And do we view ourselves as the great pearl who Jesus gave everything for? To come and save the lost, he laid his life down. And remember, last week I really emphasized, do you behold that the Lord finds you beautiful? He wants to look upon you. So that was verse 9. Moving kind of quick through these, but we got a long list that she goes through. Verse 10, my beloved speaks and says to me, arise, my love, my beautiful one, and come away. All right, and come away. So this is kind of a transition verse for us. So before, she had been saying what he does. But now we see in verse 10, my beloved speaks and says to me. So from 10 through 15, she is quoting him. So remember, I said she longs to hear his voice. Maybe on this picnic, he has told her these things, but she knows them well enough that she's quoting them. Okay. She has memorized, stored up his words. And in verse 10, what does his words start with? My beloved speaks and says to me, arise, my love, my beautiful one. So once again, this man does not shy away from how he feels about her. Words of affirmation that make her feel safe and secure is how he starts verse 10. Psalm 45:1 says this, my heart overflows with a pleasing theme. I address my verses to the king. My tongue is like the pen of a scribe. And I just thought that was pretty because it's very poetic, just like the Song of Solomon, isn't it? Like, this is a pleasing thing that's overflowing my heart. She has his words memorized and she's able to quote them, and they're full of love. All right. 5, we see a command. First command we see, my beloved speaks and says to me, arise, my love, my beautiful one, and come away with, well, not with me, come away. But we know where he wants her to come away, with him, right? I feel like this is a marriage proposal. So here we see this level of dedication that was not maybe there before, but I feel like at this point, this is a betrothed couple. They're an engaged couple. And if you look further on, starting in at the end of chapter 3 that we're not going to get to today, we see that they're getting ready for a wedding. So proposal has to happen sometime in between those two things, right? So he's saying, I am making plans, a future for us, come away. And we had that illustration of running life together. So I have a short story about during our engagement, Wes and I. Wes, we had met in college, we dated. I had an internship that I loved at EKU at their BCM. I was not making very much money, but at the time, Wes had a great job with a drilling company. And they had told him basically he would be on 3 weeks on the site, but then he would have 3 weeks off. So he goes to shadow the person that's doing his job like a month before we get married. And he finds out that those guys have been working for 3 months on at a time with 2 weeks off. And I'm very grateful that he decided that that was probably not a great idea for a newly wedded couple to only see each other not very often. So he sacrificed, he turned that job down and he took the job at the state. But that meant we were making a whole lot less money than what we thought we were going to. So to be together, I then gave up my internship to come and teach in Frankfurt. But we see in couples that there are things in life, and we're getting ready to talk about this, that turn us away from each other, and it takes sacrifice to come together. So at our church, there is a marriage class going on, and it is called Cherish, and it is an exceptional marriage class that anybody can do. There is a book called Cherish, and there's also a video series if you're interested in that. But in that study, it talks about there are 3 different postures in relationships. Okay, so there is face to face, there is face to back, and then there is back to back. Okay, so this couple is a healthy couple. We very much see that they are face to face, right? This man wants to look at her. She wants to look at him. They want to come together, right? She's called him out of the mountains, and we'll see he calls her out to be with him as well. But face to face, we have couples that are sacrificing other things to give their attention to one another. Okay, and this builds affection, it builds trust, and it takes intentionality to do this. Okay, so one way that couples and in all relationships, we will bid for attention. Okay, so I'll give you one example. When I am distracted on my telephone and Micah is bidding for my attention, he will just take his hand and put it on my face and turn my face to him, right? Because he wants that eye to eye. He's like, Mommy, you're distracted. Okay, so face-to-face couples, they're putting down their distractions to face one another. But then we have face-to-back relationships where one person is trying to connect, right? Micah is reaching towards my face, right? Turn your face back to me, Mommy. Connect with me. So one person is distracted. And then the last is back to back, where two people are facing out and they are more concerned about the things outside than working on the things on the inside. Now, different levels of commitment and relationship will determine how often you come face to face. But what in this Cherish study, what it showed is there was I think it was a psychologist that did this study where he had all these married couples come in and he would just watch them and notice when one person of the couple tried to connect or made a bid for attention to the other person in the couple and how often they would respond to that. So he invited them back a couple of years later, and he found that couples that only picked up on 0 to 30% of the bids that their partner was giving them, calls to attention, 0% of them were still married. 100% of them were divorced. Okay. From, I think, 30 to 70, only 50% were still married. Okay, that's 70 to 100% though, 100% of them were still married. And it means that turning towards each other, connection, not just in marriages, but in all of our relationships, is just super, super important. And especially coming out of the season of different through COVID and isolation, that we need to try to do some relationship repairs. But then it also reminded me of this is pointing us to a more important relationship than even those relationships on earth. How often do I ignore a bid from my Lord to turn face to face with him? How often am I neglecting my own study or quiet time or to come together in the gathering or praying for others or even just noticing the things around me? Oftentimes Micah is great at reminding me, Mommy, look at the beautiful sunrise that God has given us today. Are we aware of the things that the Lord is giving us and recognizing that that is a bid for connection? All right. So I have a quote from C.S. Lewis. I talked about the screw tape letters, and these are fresh in my mind because I just got finished writing them. But if you remember back, this is kind of poking fun at the demons. And so this is an older demon making recommendations to a younger demon. But I liked this quote. It says this: by this virtue, as by all others, our enemy, which is God, wants to turn the man's attention away from self to him and to the man's neighbors. The enemy, God, wants him to be so free from any bias in his own favor that he can rejoice in his own talents as frankly and gratefully as in his neighbor's talents or in a sunrise, an elephant or a waterfall. He wants each man in the long run to be able to recognize all creatures, even himself, as glorious and excellent things. And I thought that was a good reminder of those bids, right? Are we recognizing these talents, these gifts, these expressions of nature as a chance to worship God? He continues, he wants to kill their animal self-love, the flesh, as soon as possible, but it is his long-term policy, I fear, to restore to them a new kind of self-love, a charity and gratitude for all selves, including their own. When they have really learned to love their neighbors as themselves, they will be allowed to love themselves as their neighbor, right? So when we love our neighbors and we're not jealous of them, right? When there's not that animosity, when we're turning towards the Lord and turning away from self, and when we're turning to others and away from ourselves, that's where we find godliness and righteousness. All right. Chapter 2, verse 11 through 17. So this is continuing with what the man has said to her. Some pretty incredible verses here. For behold, the winter is past, the rain is over and gone. The flowers appear on the earth, and the time of singing has come. And the voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land. The fig tree ripens its figs, and the vines are in blossom. They give forth fragrance. Arise, my love, my beautiful one, and come away, O my dove, in the clefts of the rocks, in the crannies of the cliffs. Let me see your face. Let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet, and your face is lovely. I'm going to stop at 14. Okay, so here we see this man is giving, or has given this woman, this pep talk of encouragement and wisdom. All right, and she is quoting him. So in verse 11, he's telling her, this is a transition in life. You have been in the winter, which is hard. Okay, there was rain, but it's over and gone. And now we look forward to spring and summer, the flowers, the fruit, the good time. So I'm bringing you out of winter. Remember, that was her brother's control, the angry brothers, out of that winter and into a relationship with me. Okay, so verses 12 through 13 talk about this time of enjoyment and fruitfulness. I'm going to skip on down to verse 14. So what visual are we given here? Oh, my dove, in the clefts of the rock, in the crannies of the cliff. So here he is comparing her to this dove. And what is this dove doing? This dove is hiding. Okay, why? Why do doves hide in clefts? Well, I will tell you, doves are not very sturdy animals. Okay, they are not, right? No sharp talons, no sharp beaks. They are not strong, and they aren't very swift flyers as well, if you've watched them. Okay, so they need something to protect them. This dove, which represents her, has been hidden in the cleft rock. Okay, rock is cold. It's not very comforting, right? But she has found safety there. And where has she found safety? In isolation, by herself, in this crack. So let's see. Let me see your face. Let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your face is lovely. So here we see this woman who, because of how she was treated, has sought isolation for protection, and now he is lovingly drawing her out. In order to draw her out, the dove has to go somewhere where it thinks it's safer. And so here we have, I feel like, a very good example of how to lovingly draw people out of isolation. Okay, so the first thing we see is he says, turn to me, let me see your face. We've said that a lot, right? Come out of hiding, let me see you, just like Micah. Grab my little face, right? Mommy, I want to see you. I want to see your eyes. Okay. Then he tells her, let me hear your voice. But why? Because your voice is sweet to me. He wants to hear from her, right? She isn't just something pretty for him to look at. He doesn't want a woman just to sit there and be quiet. He wants to hear her. He wants to know her. Last week we talked about being fat, faithful, available, and teachable. So this is a very emotionally available man. I want to hear from you. Probably like, hey girl, why are you hiding up in that cliff? Talk to me. Your voice is sweet. I'm not here to judge or reject you. I want to hear from you. And third, we see your face is lovely. Remember, this is a woman with insecurities. She said, friends don't look at me. But he's saying, that's not true. You are lovely. You are lovely to me. Come out of that cliff. So he beckons her, right? Proverbs 17:9 says this, whoever covers an offense seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates close friends. Right? So here we see this. This isn't a perfect woman, but does he say, yeah, I know you've done this, and I know this person is better looking or whatever. No, he does not compare her, but he covers her in love. And that's what love does. It seeks to cover an offense. And this is what Christ does for us, right? His blood covers our sin. Why? So that we can be in the presence of a holy God. And that was his love sacrifice for all these. So I just took a note to myself, well, what can I learn about doing this for friends and family? Okay, so the first thing I kind of thought about is, do I make my face lovely? I thought this talked a lot about body language, right? So how does my face look? Am I putting forth effort to be kind, not just in what I'm saying, but how I'm saying it with my body language? I'm here. I'm a safe place. Come and speak to me. You are a sweet presence to me. I want to see your face. Okay. Oftentimes when I need to teach the little ones and they need a little bit of correcting, okay, I don't loom over them. I drop down to their level and I make my face soft, not angry. Why? Because I don't want them to retreat. I want them to hear me. Okay. So the next thing, do I make my voice sweet? That's another thing I do with the kids. I'm not going to boom at them. If they're fearful, they can't hear me. Okay. So tone, right? Tone is so important. And that's why things like text messages and emails sometimes get misread, right? Because it's hard to read tone and it's easy to read the wrong tone. So when we can, especially if there is correction or someone's been in isolation for a long time, if we can meet face to face so that you can see my eyes and you can hear my tone, it is much more productive. Okay, so we can create a situation for retreat and the need of safety, or we can use invitation to embrace one another. Okay. Just trying to decide if I want to go ahead and stop the recording here. So we're going to pick up on verse 15 and the second part of the lesson. Well, thanks for joining me for this. Bye-bye.